Hi, my name is Vincent, and I am from the Speech and Audio Processing Lab at Imperial College London. On behalf of Christine and Patrick, my co-authors, I will be presenting our EUSIPCO paper titled Speech Dereverberation of a Polynomial EVD Subspace Approach. This is the outline of my talk today. Many applications, such as hearing aids, telecommunications, automatic speech recognition ASR, and voice-controlled home systems, perform well for clean speech signals. In real-world scenarios, however, the speech signal is often degraded by background noise and reverberation, thereby reducing the performance of these systems. The performance can be improved by using speech enhancement algorithms to process the received signals. Because prior information of the target speech or the acoustic environment are unavailable, blind and unsupervised approaches are required. The single-channel and multi-channel subspace approaches for speech enhancement uses an EVD to decorrelate spectrally and spatially. However, an EVD can only decorrelate instantaneously. And this is inadequate for speech signals which naturally exhibits temporal correlations across different microphones. Other methods typically uses the short-time Fourier transform to process. In this approach, it uses the DFT to divide the broadband signals into multiple narrowbands. However, it lacks phase coherence across bands and ignores correlation between bands. To capture the space, time, and frequency correlations, polynomial matrices are introduced as an appropriate model, and to process them, polynomial EVD is used to impose spatial decorrelation over a chosen range of time shifts without introducing any phase discontinuity. In our earlier work, a polynomial EVD-based speech enhancement algorithm has been shown to be effective for noise reduction. Its performance even approaches the Oracle multi-channel Wiener filter, which uses complete knowledge of the clean speech signal, and it does not introduce any noticeable artifacts. In this talk, we will focus on speech dereverberation. When the talker speaks in an enclosed room, the received signal at the distant microphone picks up multiple delayed and attenuated copies of the speech signal, arising from multipath propagation, including the direct path and reflections of surfaces such as walls and objects in the room. The reverberant channel can therefore be decomposed into the direct path, early and late reflections as shown in red and blue, using an example of a typical room. The early reflections are closely spaced echoes which have a direct path strengthening effect and may improve speech intelligibility under certain conditions, whereas the late reflections comprise randomly distributed small amplitude components which makes it uncorrelated with the first two terms. Hence, it can be treated as an additive noise component. Incorporating this reverberant channel model, the received signal X can therefore be decomposed into the speech component as tilde in blue, which comprise the direct path and early reflections, and the noise component in red, which consists of the late reflections and the additive noise. Across n sensors, the data vector is written as the following. The polynomial EVD-based speech enhancement algorithm is summarized here, and the goal is to obtain an enhanced version of the speech using only the microphone observations X. The received signals are used to compute the space-time covariance matrix RxX, which is then used as the input into the polynomial EVD algorithm to generate the eigenvalues and eigenvector polynomial matrices. The received signals are then filtered through the eigenvector filter bank to produce the enhanced output. I will describe this in greater detail using an example from the following experiment setup. The anechoic speech from the timid corpus is convolved with the lecturum 2 in the A's corpus to generate the reverberant speech. And the reverberation time of this room is 1.22 seconds. Assuming stationarity, the spacetime covariance matrix Rxx is computed using the received signals X. More specifically, the ijth element is the cross-correlation function using the ith and j microphone signals. And tau is the time shift parameter. Due to symmetry, the Z transform of Rxx is a para-Hermitian polynomial matrix. In this talk, we will use calligraphic font to denote polynomial matrices and regular font for matrices. An illustrative example of a polynomial matrix is shown here. On the left, we can interpret the polynomial matrix as a polynomial with matrix coefficients. Or equivalently, we can interpret it as a matrix with polynomial elements, as shown on the right. In multi-channel signal processing, one typically computes the spatial covariance matrix, which can be seen as the special case of the spacetime covariance matrix when tau is equals to 0, marked by the red cross signs. They are computed using the inner product between the microphone signals. By computing the correlation between sensor pairs across all legs, we get a polynomial matrix with the auto-correlation terms on the diagonal and cross-correlation terms on the off-diagonals. The polynomial EVD of Rxx is the following, where capital lambda and capital U are the eigenvalue and eigenvector polynomial matrices respectively. The superscript P denotes the para-Hermitian operator that involves the Hermitian transpose followed by a time reversal operation. Since the speech signals and noise signals are uncorrelated, the polynomial EVD decomposes the polynomial matrix into the signal and noise subspaces in blue and red respectively, and they are orthogonal. I will now demonstrate how the polynomial EVD operates using our Rxx example. The goal of the polynomial EVD is to diagonalize the polynomial matrix at all legs. In this example, the algorithm stops when the off-diagonal elements across all legs are less than this predefined threshold. After the algorithm has converged, we get the following eigenvalue and eigenvector polynomial matrices. And to perform the polynomial EVD, one of the following algorithms can be used. The received signals X are then filtered through the eigenvector filterbank U of Z to produce outputs which are strongly decorrelated. Because we are only considering a single speaker, the enhanced and dereverberated speech signal can be recovered in the first channel via weighted reconstruction in the speech subspace. And the following output on the right is produced by filtering the received signals X through the eigenvector filterbank generated earlier. The polynomial EVD approach is compared against the generalized weighted prediction error, GWPE, a well-known dereverberation algorithm, the multi-channel subspace algorithm which uses an EVD, and the Oracle multi-channel Wiener filter, OMWF, which has knowledge of the clean speech signal, and this establishes the upper bound performance. An instrumental dereverberation measure is the direct to reverberant ratio, DRR, but the modified impulse responses after processing are generally unavailable. Instead, the normalized signal to reverberant ratio, NSRR, which is a signal-based measure shown to be equivalent to the DRR under certain conditions, and the buck spectral distortion, BSD, are used. We also use the frequency-weighted segmental SNR to measure the noise reduction performance and PESC for speech quality. The spectrogram of the reverberant speech example used earlier is shown here, and this is how it sounds like.
The situation involves some political perils. It's hard to tell an original from a forgery. Don't ask me to carry an oily rag like that.
The polynomial process signal is presented here. We observe that the spectrogram looks cleaner and sharper, and here is how it sounds like.
The situation involves some political perils. It's hard to tell an original from a forgery. Don't ask me to carry an oily rag like that.
We also note that the speech structure is preserved, and no audible artifacts were introduced. The GWP process signal will be compared, but we will first listen to the reverberant speech signal again.
The situation involves some political perils. It's hard to tell an original from a forgery. Don't ask me to carry an oily rag like that.
The GWPE.
The situation involves some political perils. It's hard to tell an original from a forgery. Don't ask me to carry an oily rag like that.
The spectrogram of the GWPE process output is much cleaner, but if you listen closely, you observe that GWPE heavily suppresses most of the earlier but not later components. And this is also observed in the original paper. We then take the difference between the reverberant and enhanced signal to give us the subtracted signals, which indicates what has been removed by the processing. We first listen to GWP subtracted, and this is how it sounds like.
The situation involves some political perils. It's hard to tell an original from a forgery. Don't ask me to carry an oily rag like that.
Polynomial EVD subtracted.
The situation involves some political perils. It's hard to tell an original from a forgery. Don't ask me to carry an oily rag like that.
And this strengthens our earlier finding that GWPE removes the earlier components, whereas polynomial EVD removes the later components. Overall, polynomial EVD provided the greatest improvement in NSRR. It comes in as second in terms of BSD, after the GWPE, which also provided the biggest improvement in PESC. In practical scenarios, however, additive background noise also needs to be considered. It is therefore important to understand the dereverberation performance when there is noise. We now consider the presence of diffuse babble noise obtained from the ACE recordings. The table here shows that polynomial EVD outperforms the other algorithms in dereverberation. It provides substantial noise reduction and even outperforms the Oracle MWF, which performs best in PESC. I have introduced polynomial matrices and polynomial EVD as a tool for processing them. I have also outlined a polynomial EVD-based speech enhancement algorithm and demonstrated its effectiveness for dereverberation, even in the presence of noise. The approach does not introduce any noticeable artifacts and is completely blind and unsupervised, and it does not use any noise estimator. These are the references used in this talk. Thank you for your attention, and the listening examples can be found in the QR code or in the URL link. Also, please visit our webpage to get more materials and videos for my work. Thank you.